365 Days has unfortunately garnered a reputation as being hotter than 50 Shades of Grey, I gave my patrons an option this month. Watch 365 Days with me and listen to me rant and rave, or watch a fun, kinky film together. They wanted to see me in Domme's space rant and rave, so we watched 365 Days together. And we all hated it. We were all really disgusted, and honestly, the ladies in my community, myself included, who have been victims of rape, molestation, sexual violation, etc., found this to be highly triggering. Actually, a couple of my girls got so upset they had to leave and just go process some emotion because it was that true to their real life sexual trauma. So after watching it with my community, I knew that I needed to review it. I knew that I needed to share the reality of the situation with you because this is not BDSM. Massimo is not a dominant, okay? What we really have and what I'm going to go over today are the 38 counts of sexual narcissism, victimized narcissism, and codependency. So today I'm going to show you how the creators of this book and film not just wrote about narcissistic manipulation, but actually tricked you as the audience into accepting eroticized abuse. And by the way, if you're interested in reading some really fucking hot erotica that's true to life, that's consensual, that's accurate to the BDSM lifestyle, written by yours truly, that is exactly why I wrote my book, Red Room Diaries. You're gonna get at least 6 orgasms out of this book, and it's non-comparative. I write non-comparative erotica, which means any person can read my stories and put themselves and their partner into the story and really experience and explore some great sexual fantasies. So, because there was so much to unpack with 365 days, we're breaking this content up over the next 2 weeks. So today we're covering the really toxic, insidious relationship dynamics that really fostered this dynamic of abuse and toxicity and violation. And next week, I'm discussing the 19 counts, yes, 19 counts of coerced consent, molestation, sexual violation that took place in 365 days that was reframed as BDSM and domination. So if you're not already subscribed to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn your notifications on so you won't miss any of this crucial content. Of all the information that I'm going to share with you today really lies in 3 main narratives that took place in this film. We have the narrative of a victimized narcissist, the narrative of a sexual narcissist, and the narrative of a sexually repressed codependent. Now, Massimo was the victimized and sexual narcissist, whereas Laura was our sexually repressed codependent. And them coming together created this toxic dynamic, tale as old as time, of the narcissist and codependent. But in this story, they dressed it up and tried to give it to us as eroticized abuse, and nothing could be further from the truth. This was toxic, this was abusive, and there is nothing sexy or erotic or arousing about narcissistic abuse. So let's break these 3 narratives down. The first one, the victimized narcissist, essentially believes that they're the misunderstood good guy who is just trying to help. That is how they justify being controlling or being manipulative or whatever. I'm not trying to violate your boundaries, I'm just trying to help. And if you would just comply with my help, it would make everything easier for us all. Contrast this with a healthy dominant who believes that I will offer help when asked. When a submissive comes to me and says, hey, I would like to be your submissive, I want to be under your authority, I want you to lead me, I want you to guide me, etc., but I will not push my will. Do we see the difference? The second narrative we have in Massimo is a sexual narcissist. He was both. Massimo was both a victimized and sexual narcissist. And the narrative of sexual narcissist is that they gain power through sex and they use sex as a tool of emotional manipulation. So for you as the partner of a sexual narcissist, your only value is in your sexual prowess and performance. Contrast this with a healthy dominant who believes and understands that safety and trust must first be established before submission is earned. And another thing, you have value outside of sex. As a submissive, you have value outside of sex. You are a person who is allowed to have boundaries, who's allowed to have limits, who's allowed to have all these things, and then we engage sexually. But your only value is not just what you can do sexually. You are a person who engages in a sexual dynamic. With a sexual narcissist, your only value, your only identity is in how you can perform for them sexually, what you can give to them sexually. But these two narratives would never have been allowed to be perpetuated without our sexually repressed codependent, Laura. Now, the narrative with a codependent, especially a sexually repressed one, is that they feel innately defective, rejected, or unwanted. And from this massive void of attention, they mistake what I call obsessive objectification and control for authentic value, respect, and love. So we contrast that with the mentality of a healthy submissive who is confident in their worth and resolute in their boundaries. So that's our foundation. Keep that in mind. Everything we talk about today is under that umbrella dynamic of a victimized and sexual narcissist and a sexually repressed codependent. This is not the dynamic of a dominant and submissive. Know that, okay? So the first phase here in both Massimo's manipulation of Laura and the creator's manipulation of us, their audience, is the setup. And this was really insidious because the creators of this book and this film really tried to emotionally manipulate us just like Massimo emotionally manipulated Laura. So right off the bat, we meet Massimo and he's looking through binoculars at Laura. And he finds no issue in watching her without her knowledge. And the sneaky thing that they did here is that his dad's response in this scene really twists Massimo's already obsessive objectification into some sort of admiration when his dad says, yes, beautiful women are heaven on the eyes, you know what I mean? It twisted actually the violation of her privacy into an admiration. You see what I'm saying? And in this scene, Massimo's dad had already said no to the human traffickers, which, yay, Massimo's dad, but that's supposed to make us feel like, oh, okay, Massimo's dad is a good guy, therefore Massimo's a good guy. And Massimo even calls them assholes. But what this did was instantly establish a redeeming trait within Massimo so that we as the audience would justify any future violations based off of this first emotional impression. Because if he's the defender, if he's the protector, if he's calling the sex traffickers, the human traffickers assholes, then he must be a good guy. He must be on the side of defender and protector, right? And then we instantly start seeing Massimo through the eyes of victimization, which is exactly what a victimized narcissist wants when his dad gets shot. We're not even 5 minutes into the movie and instantly we feel sorry for Massimo. We pity Massimo. And that is the card of victimized narcissists. They don't earn your admiration and respect based off of being a good, decent human being. They earn your admiration and respect based off of making you pity them and feel sorry for them and go, oh, poor thing. So that was our initial emotional setup with Massimo. Let's pan over to Laura and see how they tried to emotionally set us up with her as well. Our first impression of her is she's in this meeting where she's strong and authoritative and dominant, but she's overlooked and she has to push back. So how does this make us feel as the viewer? It makes us look at her like, hey, she can hold her own. She's strong, she's authoritative, she knows what she's doing, and therefore, mentally and emotionally, we won't really question her judgment in the story as it goes along. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see how the creators are already emotionally manipulating you as the audience in the same way that Massimo ended up manipulating Laura? And then we continue this dominant, empowered narrative as she's sexting her guy on the way home. Again, she's strong, she's vivacious, she's powerful, she's sexual, right? But she doesn't get a response, and so she keeps trying as she comes home. And first of all, who wrote this? Like, in what universe other than a 13-year-old porn addict's fantasy would that man turn down that woman? Beyond that, in what world would that woman be so voraciously attracted to that man where she just has to just jump his bones when she gets home, and then he turns her down? Seriously, what kind of writing is that? So then after she gets rejected for the second time of the evening, she decides to take matters into her own hands like any strong, dominant woman. She decides, well, you know what? I'm going to pleasure myself since you clearly aren't interested. So we have this whole scene where Laura is pleasuring herself. And if you notice these two scenes together, what do? What do they make us feel? They make us go, oh, look at her. And her guy doesn't want her. And we start to pity her. And we start to feel bad for her. And we start to identify with that narrative of being unwanted and being rejected. So then at that point, as the audience who's investing into Laura, our whole emotional objective is to get her to feel wanted again. Not to get her to be in an actual healthy dynamic where she is genuinely respected and genuinely admired and genuinely given rights and autonomy. No, our only emotional objective at this point is to have Laura feel wanted and not rejected. And then the final bit of Massimo's setup takes place when he gets some bad news about his business, and we instantly see that sexual narcissism flare up. He gets bad news about the business. He feels powerless, out of control, right? And what does he do? Not even 30 seconds from the time he gets the bad news to the time he gets up, pulls the curtain, and tries to initiate the flight attendant into the Mile High Club. And that right there is what I call the powerless pendulum, okay? And I can do a video about this if you would like me to do so. Drop a comment below and let me know. But the powerless pendulum is essentially, if we feel super powerless over here, we're going to use that momentum to make ourselves feel powerful in any way we can. And that's what we saw here with Massimo, our sexual narcissist. He didn't respect that flight attendant. He actually wasn't even coming on to her and having her go down on him for really sexual pleasure at that point. It was to satiate his deep void of powerlessness. What did I say that our narrative was for sexual narcissists? That is how they get their void of power filled, is through sex. So that's our setup. We've got a victimized and sexual narcissist in Massimo, not a dominant, okay? And then we've got a sexually repressed codependent in Laura. All right, now that we've discussed the three main narratives and the emotional setup, let's get into how this toxic dynamic was produced and perpetuated. And Massimo's first step was to catch the bird. So we find out that Massimo had this gigantic painting of Laura, a woman who he's never met, never spoken to, whatever, gigantic portrait of her made, hanging up in his house. This is really the epitome of obsessive objectification. He's never met her. He's never asked her if she wants to be with him, but he must possess her. It's not love. It's not genuine affection. It's possession to fill that selfish void that he has. So he's on the hunt for his wild bird after all of these years, and he finally catches the bird. And as he's explaining his 5-year obsession to his kidnapping victim, because let's call a fucking duck a duck, he sedated her, and she wakes up somewhere she did not consent to, doesn't know, and can't leave. That is a fucking kidnapping victim. So he's explaining to his kidnapping victim how he's been obsessed with her for the last 5 years, all around the death of his father. Again, what do we start doing? Pity. He's the victim. And then he frames it like she's his angel. He saw her face. She saved him. Now, through highly codependent ears, that might sound lovely and beautiful, but let me translate that for you. What that really means, you're my angel, da-da-da. I saw you, you're my angel. You're my savior, okay? And you're all mine. You're my savior, my angel. No one else's. You belong to me now. And do we see how in that mentality, this victimized mentality, all emotional responsibility gets projected onto Laura. She saved him from his depths of despair and depression and brokenness and all of that. Not him. He's not responsible for his own growth. He's not responsible for his own healing. She is. No, that's twisted, twisted, twisted. Speaking of twisted, Massimo actually tells Laura, that's why I'm giving you a chance to fall in love with me. Not because I made you, but because you want to. Okay, you're giving me a chance to fall in love with you after you sedated me, after you kidnapped me, after you won't let me leave. Now I have a chance. No, I don't have a chance. I had a chance before when I could leave. Now I can't leave. If you do not have a choice, you do not have consent. And here's the thing I want you to see. The goal in a narcissist's mind, in Massimo's mind at this point, is not to win her affection, win her love. He already has her. He already owns her. She belongs to him. His objective is to keep her, is to continue to possess her. But, and this is the sneaky part, through the eyes of a victimized narcissist, what's their narrative? I'm just the misunderstood good guy, right? Through that lens, that's how he justifies sedating her without her consent, kidnapping her, holding her against her will. All of that is, I'm giving you a chance. Look, you just have to chill out, woman, okay? I'm gonna let you go in a year if you don't fall in love with me, aka if I cannot manipulate you enough. I'll give you a chance, but see the twist, she has no choice. She has no consent, but through the twisted narrative of his victimized narcissism, he's just the misunderstood good guy. If she could just see that they're meant to be together, everything would be fine. And yeah, let me highlight that point for a second, that line that Massimo threw down. If nothing changes in 365 days, I set you free. Again, through highly codependent ears, you may interpret that as going, see, he is giving her a choice. No, he's not. No, he's not. If she had a choice, she could leave right now. Okay? But he knows that she would. So what does he have to do? I have to keep you in my grasp, under my jurisdiction, long enough to mind fuck you so that you won't want to leave. And that's really the translation here that I want you to see, is when Massimo said, if in 365 days your mind hasn't changed, then I set you free. No, what that really meant was, if you resist my manipulation and I cannot adequately conform you to the image that I want, then I'll have no use for you. That's what that means. And again, he thinks like this because he does not love her. There is no authentic love or respect for her. It's obsessive objectification, which she allows and she accepts because she's so desperate for approval, desperate for attention, desperate for validation. And let that be a lesson. If you are so chronically insecure and without worth and without value and without identity, you are prey, baby. You are prey to people who think like this. And it's all too common. So Massimo and Laura have a few scuffles in that initial conversation, and the next day he decides maybe I should pacify this chick, take her shopping. Financially coerced consent, let me just drop that truth bomb on ya, okay? So he tries to, again, emotionally manipulate her, let her guard down, I'll take you shopping, okay? So they're going out and about, going shopping. She's trying on some really sexy things, okay? And the boy just straight up walks into her dressing room and just starts looking at her, checking her out without her consent, which we'll talk about more next week. Next week is all about the 19 violations of consent in 365 days. You do not want to miss it. Make sure you are subscribed. Notifications are turned on. It's going to blow your mind, okay? Tons of consent violations, and this was one of them. He just walked in the dressing room, and she's in something sexy, and she literally says, get out. Get out. With her words, says get out. This actually turns into a big enough issue that Laura literally runs out of the store, runs away, finds the nearest law enforcement, and literally says, someone kidnapped me, I need help. And again, we'll save that whole scene for next week. But then, and here's the point right now, she shows up to dinner wearing it. Okay, so she was like, no, you're not gonna see it, da-da-da. They get into this big fight. She feels so violated, she feels so out of control, so angry, whatever. She tries to go to law enforcement to leave, identifying that she is a kidnapping victim. And then that night, she shows up wearing it under her dress to dinner. That is codependency 10101. Why did she do this? Okay. She knows that he likes it. Okay. Remember the narrative of codependents, especially sexually repressed codependents. They feel innately rejected, defective, or unwanted, right? So if she knows that he likes seeing her in that, it makes her feel powerful, even though it was a powerless instance earlier. It now makes her feel powerful wearing it because she knows that from him, she will get obsessive objectification. Again, not love, not respect, not admiration, but again, that's not really what they set us as the audience up for emotionally. We just don't want Laura to feel unwanted anymore. And that's what really Laura's goal is too, as a codependent. I just don't want to feel unwanted. I don't want to feel rejected. Something's wrong with me. I need someone to prove that something's not wrong with me. That's exactly why she wore that to dinner. Here's the thing, in a healthy relationship, she would be able to go to her partner and say, that was really fucking not cool. Don't ever do that again. I feel violated. I feel powerless. I feel all these things. And they would be able to have an intimate, emotional conversation and work through these things. But there is no connection. There is no intimacy here. Because why? She is a kidnapping victim. Okay? This is not a dominant with a submissive. This is not a healthy partnership. This is not a healthy relationship. Okay? This is a sexual and victimized narcissist hooked up with a sexually repressed codependent. This is eroticized abuse. So in Massimo's mind, phase 1 is complete. He has caught the bird. He has possessed the object of his desires. Okay, doesn't matter what she wants. I got it. I caught the bird, right? Now it's time to cage the bird. And Massimo is going to accomplish this by getting Laura to slowly break down her own boundaries through his projection and justification. And this phase features a deeper level of victimization that will cause both us and Laura to pity Massimo even more. So that night at this opulent dinner, Massimo actually says, "You'll change your mind about leaving. You just need to help me a little." Help you? You sedated me against my will. You kidnapped me against my will. You're not letting me leave, and I have to help you? And when I phrase it like that, I know it seems totally blatantly twisted, but again, the justification is very, very sneaky here. He's saying, look, I'm just, again, the misunderstood good guy. I am just trying to make this work between us. You just have to help me a little. The translation there is he's the one being so gracious and so generous. And she, just by having autonomy and boundaries, is being unruly or difficult. That is how narcissists look at their victims. You put them on a pedestal, but at the same time, you want to change everything about them. And that's the dichotomy we see with Massimo and Laura. And then the boy actually goes on to say, I need you to teach me how to be gentle for you. Here's the thing. Massimo is totally projecting the responsibility for his own emotions, his own gentleness or lack thereof onto Laura. It is now her responsibility. If he's not gentle, she didn't teach him well enough. He is a grown-ass man, okay? Go to counseling, read some books. It is not your kidnapping victim's job to teach you anything. But because Laura is our codependent and her goal is to fill that void of feeling unwanted or defective, rejected, whatever, she gladly takes on this responsibility. And I'm speaking from experience here. She gladly takes on the responsibility because it makes her feel safe. It not only gives her a sense of emotional security, but also having Massimo as her project, so to speak, kind of puts her back in a position of a little bit of power amongst all this innate violation. You see what I'm saying? So it's obviously going to have an appeal to her, and that is how he gets those hooks of manipulation in her. Do you see how this kind of manipulation is not possible without a codependent counterpart? So through codependent eyes, Laura and a lot of you as well start to really pity Massimo and look at him through eyes of pity and victimization and empathy, like, oh, he's just trying to be a good guy and he just needs a little help. But remember, Massimo's goal at this point is not to win Laura's love, affection, admiration, any of that. He owns her already. That's a check mark, done deal. He possesses her already. Check mark, done deal. His goal, his objective is merely to keep her. He's trapped the bird. Now he's just got to cage the bird. And so when he says, teach me this for you, it's not for Laura. It's for him so that he can maintain his possession. But at the same time, it makes Laura feel emotionally good. And that is the sneakiest thing about manipulators. That's what I really want you to pay attention to. The best, and by best I mean worst, most insidious manipulators make you feel good. That's why there's always the honeymoon phase in the cycle of abuse, okay? It's to perpetuate the abuse. Because we tend to not question pleasurable things. We tend to question pain. But we tend to not to question pleasurable things. And that's why, like, when you get too much change at the grocery store, couple extra bucks, I get back in my pocket, who cares? But if they didn't give you that extra 50 cents off, all hell breaks loose. See what I'm saying? We question pain. We often don't question pleasure. And that's a really effective method for manipulators, and that's exactly what we see with Massimo here. This is for you. Help me be gentle for you. No, it's for him to keep his trapped bird in a cage. And I can already hear the fans of this movie saying, but he gave her laptop and her cell phone. She asked for it and he gave it to her, and he's not trying to be a bad guy. He's not trying to trap her. You're just being a bitch. I'm actually not, and here's why. Massimo giving Laura her laptop and cell phone was probably the best example of really, really sneaky, insidious manipulation, because he gives her phone and her laptop to her at around the 42-minute mark. But around the 32-minute mark, she asked for it. Can I have my phone and my laptop? Days earlier, whatever. And he said no. He actually didn't say no. He said, when it's the right time. And he meant that literally. She presented him with a pawn. Okay? She presented him with a want. And her desires are pawns to be used to play at the appropriate time. So when he said at the right time, he meant that. He meant that, okay, I'll give you your phone and your laptop, but when I can use it to manipulate you. Now, of course, he didn't say that, and manipulators won't say that. And that's why you have me. So let's look at the context around why and when she got the cell phone and laptop. It was only after she got so done with his bullshit, with being a kidnapping victim, she literally physically tried to run away, and in doing so, contacted the authorities. Now, thankfully for Massimo, he had already bought them off, but That is a loose end, baby. That is a big loose end that he cannot have slipping through his fingers again. So giving her the cell phone and laptop was not extending freedom or autonomy to her in any way, shape, or form. It was solely emotional manipulation. It was so she could just let her guard down and then again start going, oh, he really is a good guy, even though he had denied her perfectly reasonable request prior. So what's this going to do? It's going to make her feel at ease. Let her guard down. And he would be able to push those boundaries a little bit more. And honestly, in real life, I don't know if this was written into the book, which I will never, ever, ever read. But I don't know if this is written into the book or not, but in real life, situations like this, when he gave her the cell phone and laptop back, he would attract the keystrokes. He would attract who she's texting, who she's calling, photos, emails, you name it, okay? And that's probably what happened in this case as well. Oh, you want your cell phone and laptop? Okay, it's a great way for me to pacify you so you won't feel like you had to run away or escape. And then I can also get more data on you to use against you later. And finally, in the cage the bird phase, in the phase where we are trying to make Laura and the creators make us feel at ease enough to accept the abuse, Massimo's victimized narcissism rears its ugly head when Laura wakes up to Massimo, a topless Massimo, sprawled out in her bed. Now he's laying on his back, his arms are behind his head, his chest is fully exposed, he's topless obviously. And I may be reading too much into this, I doubt I am, but he's laying on his back and his scar is fully exposed to her. She actually has a moment where she almost touches it, and you can see that she's emotionally moved by it. It softens her. To me, that's totally purposeful. All right, so at this point, Massimo has caught the bird, caged the bird, and now it's time to clip the bird's wings so that the bird can never fly away again. And we can start this process now because Massimo at this point has laid enough emotional groundwork so that Laura will start to question and remove her own boundaries. And again, it's only made possible due to Laura's deep, deep sense of codependency, deep sense of feeling unwanted, rejected, etc. And so she's going to gladly accept Massimo's obsessive objectification as genuine love, affection, respect, and desire. And this is the phase where the sexual narcissism comes more into play. We had to lay the emotional groundwork with the victimized narcissism, and now we're going to see Massimo's strategy flip a little bit, and very, very quickly. Right after he was sprawled out in bed, and the little scar moment where she was reaching out, oh, it's so sad. She's showering. He invites himself into the shower. Okay, I didn't want you in here. He invites himself into the shower, and she's checking him out because we know that she's a sexual creature, okay? Just because you're a sexual creature, have sexual appetites, does not mean that you should be abused by a sexual narcissist, okay? But anyway, she's looking at him because he's a man and she's a woman and she finds him attractive. And he actually brings sexual attention to himself by asking her, do you want to touch it? Again, not even like a, hey, do you want to do something, but do you want to give me pleasure? Do you want to worship me? Do you want to serve me? Do you want to fuel my ego? But again, we see that his obsessive objectification makes codependent Laura feel good, feel wanted, feel desired, all of those things. So she starts feeling empowered and starts getting sexually aggressive in response. And we know this is a total power move on her part. She's manipulating him for a sense of power. He's manipulating her for a sense of power. It's just all kinds of toxic manipulation for selfish voids back and forth. But she tries to walk away because she got her little power fill, right? She doesn't want to do anything with him sexually. She just wants to get that little boost and not feel so powerless. And so she got it. She's walking away. He doesn't like that. He physically grabs her, pulls her back, and says, don't provoke me. Don't provoke me. Again, this is not a dominant and submissive doing some sort of consensual role play scene, consensual primal play scene, consensual edge play scene. This is a predator with their kidnapping victim. And he's now saying, don't provoke me. As he has her naked in the shower, grabs or whatever, don't provoke me. Let's translate that for you. If you do anything that I consider a provocation, as in be playful, be feisty, be vivacious, be anything but totally meek, totally mild, totally give you my full identity and full will, if you do anything I consider a provocation, I cannot be held responsible for the consequences because I warned you. Now, this next scene I actually found to be one of the most triggering scenes. So for those of you who have a little bit of past trauma, etc., just maybe go grab your stuffy, go get an extra blanket, whatever you gotta do, baby. But this scene I was really pissed off about. Massimo wants to take Laura out of the country, and she vehemently refuses to go. But again, we'll talk about that next week. But right now, for our purposes here, Massimo is literally just standing, watching as one of his bodyguards literally physically hoists Laura over his shoulder because she refuses to get on the airplane, okay? We're physically refusing, so we physically overpower and puts her on the airplane. And then the bitch says she's got quite a temper. Massimo views Laura's perfectly normal, reasonable, emotional reaction to the violation of a perfectly normal, reasonable boundary as a temper. And this is so true to life when you're dealing with a narcissist. In their book, essentially any emotion other than happy compliance, you do whatever they say and you're thrilled about it, is you being disobedient, disrespectful, difficult, unruly, etc. And that's exactly how Massimo views Laura. She's not allowed to be vivacious. She's not allowed to be loud. She's not allowed to be passionate. She's not allowed to assert herself or have boundaries in any way. And if she does, she has a temper and she's being difficult. And we actually see this come back later on when Massimo is talking to his cousin and his cousin is asking him, are you happy? Oh, you finally found her. Are you happy? Not, was this consensual? Does she like you? Does she want to be with you? No. Are you happy with your kidnapping victim? Anyway, so Massimo's response to are you happy is, it's difficult. It's difficult. It's difficult. Again, this just goes to show that Massimo views any sort of pushback, any sort of boundary, anything but total, complete, blind obedience and happy compliance as difficult. And that is exactly how narcissists look at their victims. This is not a dominant with a submissive. This is a narcissist with a codependent. This is a predator with a kidnapping victim. So anyway, getting back to our plane scene. Back at around 25 to 26 minutes in their first conversation, really, Massimo tells Laura that he won't do anything without her permission. Yet now, just like 25 minutes later into the movie, while she is tied up, hands together, totally tied up on the plane, with a group of strange men behind her, what does he do? He gropes her. He fucking molests her when she physically cannot do anything to stop him. So remember how I said the victimized narcissism was kind of the first phase where it was to break down her emotional boundaries? This is the next phase. This is the sexual narcissism really rearing its ugly head. And the purpose of this phase is to get her to break down her physical boundaries. And he attempts to use his sexual prowess to do so, as we see after he is done groping and molesting his kidnapping victim without her consent. He has the audacity to say, you have to earn the pleasure. This is not a dominant and submissive who have discussed their limits and their boundaries and are engaging in a consensual scene of BDSM play with consensual orgasm, denial, and control. This is a predator with their kidnapping victim. And the translation here from Massimo to Laura is, hey, I get whatever the fuck I want. Preferably by you. I get to be serviced by you, worshipped by you, pleasured by you, whenever the fuck I want. But you, woman, you have to work. You have to earn. You have to strive. Because remember, he's playing on that narrative of she feels innately defective, innately unwanted, innately rejected. So if he can sneakily establish, as he's arousing her, if he can sneakily establish that you have to work for your pleasure, what is it doing? It's speaking right to that void inside of her that says you're not good enough and you need to try harder. So when they return home, Laura is obviously feeling pretty powerless by all of the additional violations and justification thereof on their little trip, on their little outing. So again, the powerless pendulum comes swinging into place, and Laura decides that she needs to get some of that power back. So she essentially does what she did earlier in the shower. She approaches Massimo, knocks on his bedroom door, he invites her in, she gets a little teasy, even spreads her legs, all kinds of things. Is like totally tease to get that obsessive objectification, which he gave her. And then what does she do? She got that boost of power. She starts to walk away. And this shows us that she is now fully accepting the narrative that her value equals obsessive objectification. She feels powerful when she's objectified now. That should not be how we feel. When someone objectifies us and degrades us and demeans us and does not give us love and does not give us respect and does not give us care, we shouldn't feel empowered, but she does. Do you see how twisted the narrative becomes through the lens of her codependency? And as you can imagine, Massimo does not like this at all because he's the sexual narcissist, and through sex, that's how he stays in control. That's how he gets his ego boost. So no, we cannot have this woman teasing and denying him. So Massimo invites another woman in, and without Laura's consent, while she's tied up without her consent, which we'll talk about next week. So brings this woman in so Laura can watch, not even them having sex, but watch the woman orally worship Massimo in front of his lion painting. Okay, can we just stop there and say, let that be a gigantic red flag to you. If you walk into someone's bedroom and they have a gigantic portrait of themselves with a lion that is facing their bed, run. Just run. So anyway, he brings Ariana Grande in and she's doing her thing. And the takeaway here really revealed his sexual narcissism. They're not even having sex. What he did was he established to Laura, here's your standard. Here's how I expect you to look. Here's how I expect you to act. Here's how I expect you to perform. Here's how I expect you to please me. And that is a huge reason why I write non-comparative erotica, because comparison is a killer of confidence and a killer of connection. And that's what Massimo did. He brought in this element of comparison, this really intense element of comparison to show her not what you're missing. No, that's how he phrased it. Not what she's missing, but what she needs to become. And as you can imagine, things go terribly wrong between Massimo and Laura after Ariana Grande leaves, and so Laura decides that she needs to get her power back yet again. So what does she do? She dresses up highly sexual, does her hair exactly like the girl that Massimo just brought in, and then goes up in the club to try to make Massimo jealous by dancing with other guys, flirting with other guys, etc. Remember, codependence, especially sexually repressed codependence with a sexual narcissist, interpret that obsessive objectification as genuine love and admiration. So then, through that twisted narrative, Laura's goal becomes to constantly be sexy enough. And she has to constantly be sexy enough to keep his attention. If she wants any sort of connection at all, it has to come through sex. And so if it has to come through sex, then she has to be constantly highly sexual. So now that Massimo has caught the bird, caged the bird, and clipped the bird's wings, it's time to talk about the golden cage. And in this phase, we see how the vacillation of Massimo's victimized narcissism and sexual narcissism only perpetuates Laura's codependency and further brainwashes her into accepting this abuse. This is especially evident the next day after Laura's dancing with one of the guys. He takes it too far, actually tries to rape her, and it causes this big problem with all of the mafia families. And Massimo offers no comfort, no empathy, no support. Instead, what does he do? He blames Laura for the man's inappropriate actions, and he blames her for his own violent response when he says, well, I wouldn't have had to if you wouldn't have. His violent actions are now Laura's responsibility. But Laura, rightfully so, pushes back a little bit. Like, what the hell? It's not my fault, right? But of course, Massimo can't take that. They start getting into a fight. One thing leads to another. Laura falls off of the boat. And after he saves her from the ocean, his love, right? His love. He says, why are you so disobedient? But she apologizes. She actually apologizes. And that's the sad part. That's why it's called the golden cage. It may look good on the outside, but you're trapped, and Laura's trapped. And how is she trapped? What does this show us? She's willing to accept his projected blame now, even when she didn't do anything wrong. And she's willing to accept his projected blame just to keep the peace. And just like there was no comfort or empathy or connection about the whole attempted rape, well, when Laura finds out that she is wanted dead, she's obviously upset. Who wouldn't be? She finds this out at a party. She wants to leave the party. Who wouldn't? But instead of offering any sort of comfort, communication, connection, any of that, what happens? Massimo comes on her sexually and soothes via sex. Because that, with a sexual narcissist, that is the only basis of connection you have. We actually see even more evidence of this after their little sexual scene here in the bathroom. He sends Laura away with no contact, right? Attempting probably to protect her, but still, yeah, there's a way to go about it. And sends her away, no contact. And then one day he just randomly shows up to her new apartment. And so, yeah, she starts asking questions and gets emotional. Valid questions, valid emotions. Instead of her getting any sort of answers, there being any sort of communication, connection, anything, we just get highly sexual, highly aggressive. Why? Again, because to a sexual narcissist, sex is not for pleasure. Sex feels good, which is a great bonus, but sex is for power. Not we have a consensual power exchange relationship and then we add sexual elements into it. No. Sex is for power, sex is for control, and sex is for manipulation in the eyes of a sexual narcissist. Oh, and then, oh my God, one of the most infuriating moments of the whole movie is when Laura actually says, I don't need 365 days. I can't even get through it, you guys. I love you. Ugh. It was so bad, you guys. It was so bad. Like, I may have literally screamed when I watched that. Patrons, did I? So yeah, she says that. After no contact, sends her away, asks all these questions, gets no answers, just has a night of sex, and then she wakes up and they get engaged after 2 months. 2 months of knowing each other. 2 months. And here's the takeaway from that. Narcissists and codependents tend to move incredibly fast. Why? Because narcissists already look at that person as, you're mine. I own you, I possess you, you belong to me. So now it's just the logistics. I mean, if you're already mine, we might as well get married. See what I'm saying? But unfortunately for Mr. Momo with the mojo, he lost his prize. His dove died. Yep, they kill off Laura and her badass dominant friend Olga. Can we just stop and take a moment? She was the only redeeming character in this entire film. She was so hilarious, so amazing, and again, so true to life that the codependent won't listen to the dominant, panned out friend. Codependents, if you've got strong, dominant people in your life that are telling you, hey, this is a bad situation, please listen to them because you are blind by your own codependency, child. So yeah, Laura, a pregnant Laura, and the badass dominant friend die. Massimo loses his dove, his prized possession. And the thing that I hated most about that ending is it ended the same way it began. Pity for this little bitch. Pity for Massimo. Again, we just feel bad for him. We don't look at him as the guy who kidnapped a woman against her consent, groped her, was violent with her, molested her, manipulated her, mind-fucked her, stripped of her identity, all of these things. We pity him. And that is the most insidious point about victimized narcissism, is that is what they hide behind. Pity. Your empathy. But like I said, the movie wasn't all bad. You had Olga, which was wonderful. I also have to give credit to the wardrobe. The wardrobe was great. Set design was great. And also, there was one scene, there was one beautiful moment in this film that, to me, almost redeemed everything. If we could have just kept Massimo on his knees the whole time, I think it would have been a terrific film. So did you watch this film and did you pick up on any of the things that I discussed today? If so, comment below and let me know some of your observations. I would love to hear them. And if you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you can join me next week as I discuss the 19 counts of violated or swayed consent in 365 days. And if you want to join me and my community in having a direct hand in shutting this eroticized abuse and bullshit down, I put the link in the description to this petition that is actively going around to get 365 days removed from Netflix due to its promotion of kidnapping and sexual violation.